Brown, former athletic great at Brown University
Yep.
and candidate for United States Senate. And we've been to D.C. with Colin Reed talking about the congressional races and what the Pennsylvania 18th district means to the midterm elections. Jack Hayes, athletic director of Brown University. How long have you been at Brown now?
Year 6.
Year six. Time is flying by. So you cannot blame your predecessor anymore for anything at year 6.
Anything that's wrong now, I'm going to have to take a hit for. Yes,
That's right.
But it's a great place and great institution. President Paxson's been a super leader, and I'm thrilled for the opportunity to be able to work there.
And she goes to all the men's basketball games.
She goes to
women's too?
she goes to a lot of athletic events.
Yeah.
She goes to men's basketball, women's basketball. She's at a lot of events, knows the student athletes, meets with them. She's been a great leader, is a great leader.
So let's talk about a few things. We're right in Big Dance neighborhood. Brown had an interesting season. I'm going to say it that way. A good out-of-conference year where you saw some young talent really emerge. Brandon Anderson, a sophomore point guard, looks really like the real deal.
Yes.
He's a guy that is playing well and doing a lot of things that you really need out of a point guard in the tournament. And really look like a guy who could run a team.
Yeah, and only a sophomore.
And only a sophomore.
So a sophomore who played a lot of minutes his first year, probably off the ball more with Tavon Blackman being a senior.
Sure.
And then his maturity and growth as a sophomore, I think was greater than any of us had expected. I certainly thought he was going to help us, and he was only going to continue to get better, but the jump that he made from his freshman season to his sophomore season was significant.
Going into the Ivy League season, we had a piece on him, and he was in the top 10 NCAA stat lists on about 5-6 different categories.
Sure.
He was up there in scoring. He wasn't top 10, but he free throws per game, free throw percentage.
Made and taken.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really did a good job. And it seemed like the better the opponent, the URIs, the PCs, he played real games.
He did. He did. I think we have a good non-conference schedule. We're fortunate to always have teams like Providence and URI on that, 2 teams that are now in the NCAA tournament. We played at Northwestern, and Brandon did a super job in those games against the highest level competition.
I think he must average 20 points a game or darn
He did.
close.
He was averaging close to 20 for a while. He finished averaging 17 and a half, probably averaged 8 as a freshman. So his jump from freshman year to sophomore year was exactly what you'd hope for.
Staying on Brown basketball for a second, maybe the most interesting athlete. I've been going to Brown games, been going back to Marvel when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and so I've seen a few. Cambridge is a remarkable basketball player.
Desmond Cambridge is a freshman from Nashville, Tennessee. Great recruit by head coach Mike Martin. Wonderful kid, great student. Ivy League Rookie of the Year. And he had some eye-opening plays really right from the beginning of the season. And in those games against the schools I mentioned, like Rhode Island, Providence, Northwestern, athletically he held his own.
Yeah.
And he also averaged just under 18 points a game as a freshman, broke the freshman scoring mark at Brown. And so when you look at Brandon Anderson, Desmond Cambridge, there's a lot to build around over these next 2 years.
Hunt is not too pleased about him breaking the scoring record.
Earl Hunt is who has that record for the freshman year and the 4-year career. I'm sure has sat back thinking, all right, well, let's see what happens 4 years from now.
We were at a game, a Columbia game. Brown kind of stole it. Everything went right in the final few seconds.
Yep.
He had 4 dunks. That 3 of those dunks, I don't think anybody has ever seen, certainly at the Pizzatola.
Not at Brown.
Not at Brown University. Including a breakaway 360 dunk.
Right. Not a lot of 360s in the Ivy League.
There are not a lot of 360s in the Ivy League.
But a great player who I'm sure is ready to work on where he needs to get better. And Josh, that's the name of the game at the college level is how do you continue getting better? What do you do next? Everybody, and it doesn't matter what the school is.
Right.
Everybody has things that they need to work on to get better, and every other school is paying attention to where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. The Ivy Leagues, we were talking earlier, it's interesting, where you play those teams the second time around
right.
in the schedule, they know what you want to do.
Right.
They know where your strengths are, both as a team and as individuals. And so our responsibility going forward, certainly Desmond's, the coaching staff, is how do we continue to improve as individuals and as a team, and what does Desmond do to work on those things to continue to get better?
And listen, Cambridge came in as a really dominant player as a freshman, very unusual situation. I think all of us remember Mark McAndrew, who came in, a Barrington kid who went to Worcester Academy, came in as a okay freshman player,
Right.
and I may be being giving him a pat on the back there, but left as a two-time first-team All-Ivy and just a tremendous player. That was a guy who put work ethic in,
Yep.
like really nobody had.
In my
and
time
transformed.
at Brown, that person was Cedric.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
so Cedric Quacamensa, who came in really as a rebounder.
Yeah.
We were just looking at these numbers the other day. Did not take a three-point field goal his freshman season, and I want to say may have been 0 for 1 as a sophomore. And then when he was a senior, he shot 43% from the three-point line.
Amazing.
And really changed his game. And although he ended up the all-time leading shot blocker in the Ivy League and was a great rebounder, he developed an offensive game that really just progressed from year to year during his time at Brown.
Listen, I think there's a sense, that there's the haves and the have-nots, and the Browns and the PCs and the URIs are on one tier. I've seen, I think Mike Martin's had 6 games against Cooley. He's won 2.
Right.
And in 2 other games, one went to overtime, and another one, Sean McGonigal had an open three-pointer that would have won the game.
Correct.
Cooley's got to be waiting for Mike to get out of town, because
We,
those are dog fights every year.
Yeah, we've played well against them.
So a little peek in, it's great to see the success of URI and PC this year. Obviously, Providence has it going with Coach Cooley, 5 straight years into the tournament.
Yeah.
People can talk about all the success of Joe Mulaney and Dave Gavitt. Those guys never even came close to 5 straight years at the NCAA tournament. This is really turning into a bit of a juggernaut of a real national program.
It's been great. It's been great. I'm a Providence grad, and my friends from Providence couldn't be happier. So many of them were at the Garden on Saturday night, and I live near Ed, and we're good friends, and I couldn't be happier for him, and couldn't be more proud as a Providence alum about what he's done, what he has done, what Bob Driscoll, the director of athletics, has done. They've been so good to Providence College.
And the fans have really responded. Those games are packed. Every Big East game virtually is either completely sold out or within 100 seats around the top of the place.
Question.
The communities come to support it. Jump down to Kingston. Obviously, URI is now back-to-back years into the NCAA tournament. And Coach Hurley's really transformed that place from a really turning the Ryan Center into what it was built to be, which is a really competitive basketball environment. And they went 15-1 or whatever the record was down there. Can URI keep him?
I think it's difficult. It's always a challenge, and again, Thor's a good friend. Keeping coaches is a tough thing to do. You do everything you can. We lost our lacrosse coach after we went to the Final Four 2 years ago. He became the head coach at Virginia. So it is a challenge. What you'd like to do is be in a position. Number one, you want people to want your coaches. If other institutions want it's far worse if schools have openings and the last people they want to talk to are your coach. So you want to be able to retain your coaches as often as you can, but if they are wanted by other schools, it must mean that your institution, your athletic program and sport is in a good situation. If you can't keep them, then you have a good job to promote and you have an opening that people are going to be very interested in.
Let's jump over to just, listen, people don't understand this. You offer the 3rd most Division I sports of any college in America.
Yes.
The thought of that, you would think, it's got to be Michigan or Alabama or USC or something like that.
Brown.
And it's Brown University. And how many Division I sports do you now offer, men's and women's?
38.
38. That's
925 athletes.
925. Talk about the challenges of that, just from infrastructure, scheduling, financing, Title IX. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It's a complexity.
Yeah, it is complex. It's a challenge. It's a great one to be involved in every day. A lot of coaches. There are a lot of coaches. There are a lot of assistant coaches, and the personnel piece is probably the greatest challenge. There's always coaches coming, there's coaches going, assistant coaches leaving, and trying to maintain the coaching piece is critical because you want coaches to stay, just as we just talked about. But you want to make sure that you have the right people in place, and there's a lot of programs you have to be concerned about, all of them. And but it also gives you an opportunity to meet some great students. 925 is a lot, but it also gives you an opportunity to meet so many of them. And at a place like Brown, they're outstanding students. They are truly dedicated to to participating in athletics. They want to win. They want to win the right way. But there's a balance that they're trying to maintain academically, and we're trying to help every team and every student through that. So you take that, you combine working with alums from all those sports, scheduling practices and games. It's a challenge, but it's a great one.
And you think about, if you look at the last 12 months, you had two former Brown athletes on the U.S. Olympic team on bobsleds. You had one former Brown student athlete who was a star in Hamilton on Broadway for a couple of years, and you had a fourth who went to the Super Bowl for the third time in 4 years. They're a different breed.
It is really hard. It is really hard to maintain that balance. I think they have a sense of it when they arrive, and all of them had opportunities to go to other schools,
right.
And many of them had scholarship opportunities. So they could play at the highest level, and they felt like the highest level for them was a balance of the academic piece and the athletic piece, and certainly in some of our sports, the highest level the Ivy League is in.
Yeah, right.
When you're in the Final Four in lacrosse and you have the National Player of the Year, you are at the highest level.
Right.
And so trying to make that experience a great one for all 925 athletes is the challenge, but it's a challenge that we take seriously every day.
Dylan Malloy obviously was as fun an athlete to watch play any sport. I don't care if it was watching Larry Bird with the Celtics. He was he was both bull and creativity mixed together, and obviously made a huge impression on Brown lacrosse and took it from really back to that top tier of a top team on an annual basis. Sticking on lacrosse for 1 second, a little mixed at the beginning, and then travel down to Philly to play the number 4 ranked team Villanova in the country, and win that game with a great second half. And it wasn't that close. Yeah,
really, we were down 5-0, and then after that, we really were in control of the game. Ended up winning 12-9. Mike Daly does a great job. Had that great career at Tufts before he came to Brown 2 years ago. And what he's been able to do is find ways to get the team to rally the team after a tough loss, and we bounce right back. So we were 1-2, lost to a very good Rutgers team, and then we go down and we beat the number 4 team in the country who hadn't lost.
Right.
And so now we open up league play at Harvard this weekend, and I'm excited to get that going.
And Brown lacrosse has been getting some great attendance the last couple of years. And got some great home games this year. Obviously, like basketball in the Ivies, now has gone to a 4-team playoff. So there's a chance to be able to get into the NCAA tournament, and build some excitement there.
Yeah, the tournaments are great. The irony on the lacrosse tournament is that in 15 and 16, we were the Ivy League regular season champion, hosted the championship, and got knocked out in the first round, both nights. But we were good. We had a good enough resume to get into the NCAA tournament. Last year, we got in and played in that 2-3 game against Princeton, and won the first night, and then lost a real tough game to the eventual champion Yale, who went on to the NCAA. So what I like about the tournaments, I don't think it provides additional incentive for students who otherwise might have been mathematically eliminated. Those students want to play, and they care about winning, and they have a tremendous amount of pride. I think the events become better games and better events for everybody else.
Yeah.
Because if you're playing a game that matters in the sense of whether or not you could advance to the tournament, people care about that more than if you're simply fans, that is. than if a team is simply playing out the string to end the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And just jump back to basketball. Good attendance this year.
Yeah, at the Ivy League tournament. Yeah. Good attendance again. That tournament for the first 2 years has been at the Palestra. I think the Palestra for most basketball fans would be on a short list of places
Mecca.
that you have to see a basketball game. We've now got to make a decision as 8 institutions as to where do we go next. We needed to have it at the Palestra to get it off the ground, and it may stay, it may go somewhere else. We've got to figure that out in the next couple of months.
We'd take it up here in Providence at the Dunkin' Donuts Center.
We would. I mean, I think that we need to look at sites where they've hosted basketball events, and clearly the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament here in Providence have always been great.
Spectacular.
Spectacular. Proximity to hotels, proximity to restaurants, easy to get to off the highway. Everything that you would look for, and certainly within the Ivy League footprint, with 2 schools north. You think back to the NCAA tournament game 2 years ago when Yale played here. Such an easy ride for the people from New Haven, and such a memorable experience for them. Beating Baylor and then having that great game with Duke.
Yeah, those were 2 remarkably good basketball games. That whole tournament down in Providence 3 years ago, is it now? Accordingly. Let's go over to football. We're reporting a lot. I think there's a lot of concerns by everybody about what the impact of long-term playing of football and the head injury factor. Boston Globe on Sunday had a piece about the number of former Patriots from the glory years of 01, 03, and 04. But the long history, 300 ex-Patriots are part of the class action suit against the NFL and Rydell Helmet Company, including some Brown grads. Sean Morey's on there, who's a former wide receiver, played about 10 years with Pittsburgh and Arizona. These guys are by the time they're finished playing football, they're pretty banged up. Talk a little bit about how Brown football and the Ivies have transformed, and what's the long-term prognosis?
Yeah, the Ivy League has been proactive about studying concussions and trying to put students in the best situation you can. What you wonder about those reports is how many concussions have those individuals had, and how far do they date back? Which I don't think anyone would really is completely sure. So what happens now at Brown and in the Ivy League? Very limited contact in practice, protocols that if somebody has a head injury, they come out of the game. And you look back, those things didn't exist in the past.
Oh God, no.
And you wonder how many people went back into a game when they had a concussion, and how many of those concussions took place in practice. And I do think people who oversee the sport are working hard to figure out how do you protect those individuals that play, and what protocols do you take to put them in the best situation.
As a former high school and college athlete, I literally just don't remember any concussions of teammates. People just didn't get concussed. It didn't get diagnosed as a concussion. There were lots of concussions, but it was, okay, so you get your bell rung, jump back in,
and I think there was a lot of that, and you wonder how many hits took place right after that that caused serious problems. And I do think, can you eliminate concussions? I don't think you can eliminate concussions from any contact sport. But what steps can you take to try to be safe, both in practice and in games when a student does get injured? I think what you see now, at least what we see at Brown, is we see students going to the training staff and saying, so-and-so doesn't seem right. And now another student's proactive enough to bring it to the attention of the medical staff. And that's been part of the education process.
Listen, competitive athletes want to be in games. They don't want to they don't want to lose their position. It's all those things, that you've been trained to stay in the game. Do you, Malcolm Galwell, Tipping Point author, writes the New Yorker, and about almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, in the New Yorker, he had a major piece about CTE. And in that piece, he said, listen, at some point the NFL is not going to be the NFL. It's going to be much more of a flag football league. It'll still be dynamic. It'll be fast. But no one can absorb this number of hits at this speed by this size of athletes. It's physically not possible. And I think there's some questions about that size, 300-pound. You have a linebacker who's at the combine who runs a 4.38 40. Who can absorb, whose head can absorb being hit by him.
The players keep getting bigger.
Right,
They
faster.
keep getting faster. And if you look back 40 years ago, I mean, or whatever point, you'd find people in leather helmets, and then you'd find people in helmets that, were barely bigger than their head. So what happens 20, 40 years from now? I agree with you. I do think you'd see significant changes. Just like, I think that people may not think there hasn't been much change unless you went back and looked at what the equipment was like 40 years ago. So the equipment has changed, but to your point earlier, so has the size of the individuals playing and the speed of the game. So there's definitely changes to come. But I think as it goes, a lot of those changes that have happened recently and will continue to be enforced and emphasized are protocols and what happens in practice.
You've seen a big change in lacrosse and what's a legal hit versus what isn't a legal hit. Just in the last 5 years, it's a dramatic change in the game. Let's just jump to one other issue before we jump off. Crew at Brown is a perennial power.
Right.
Sometimes national champion. How are we looking this year?
Yeah, the same. I think the John Murphy as the head coach of the women and Paul Cook, the head coach of the men, do a tremendous job, and we compete against the best teams in the country. And the Ivy League is right up there as some of the best teams in the country. So it's been interesting to go up against Ohio State, Texas, Stanford, as well as all the teams in the league. And I've been to that national championship, and when we've been in it, on the women's side, we've been in it every year since it's existed. But when you go in and you see Brown, Princeton, and then Texas, Ohio State, Cal, the University of Washington. This is a big time athletic programs, and it's a great opportunity for our students who, as I said earlier, are committed academically and athletically. I'm not saying that those other students aren't, but they maintain that commitment, but they want to play at the highest level, and the members of the rowing program get to do that. And
that's on both the men's and the women's side. The women have actually probably had a little bit historically more success than
they have. But the men have been really strong. And one of the things that we had happen 3 years ago was we had the University of Washington, who was the #1 team in the country and the defending national champion on the men's side, come back and row at Brown.
Oh, nice.
If you're the #1 team in the country, you don't have to go anywhere.
That's
everybody wants to compete against them. They'll do whatever they can to go there. And for Washington to decide that they're going to come to Providence, Rhode Island, and compete against Brown, it said a lot about Paul Cook, our coach, about the history of our program, and about Brown being an institution that's well respected.
Anything else we should know about excitement over on College Hill?
All is well at Brown. Come to as many games as you can. We have great students, great athletes that represent Brown and Rhode Island extremely well, and we'd be happy to have everyone there.
That's great. Like the plug, I'll say this, the lacrosse environment, just the way the field is set, the way the fans are set, is as good a venue. And there's some spectacular home games, good rivalry games this year.
Some great weekend games coming up with UMass, Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth, all on Saturdays starting at the end of this month.
And then I can't remember who's home and away, but regardless, the Bryant Brown, Providence Brown games, whatever venue they're in, they're all great games, and they usually comes down to nowadays the last few minutes. I mean, those are all competitive
games. The games have been great, and on the women's side, we've been very competitive too. We had a great game with Princeton just 2 weeks ago, and so both the men and the women have a good stretch coming up.
We're going to take a break. I want to thank Jack Hayes, athletic director at Brown University, for jumping in and filling us in on everything that's going on. And Kate Nagel, news editor, will be right back in about 1 minute. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.